Hi, my name is Joanne Webb, and I'm going to read you something that I wrote a few months ago called A Love Letter to Prejudice on the Emerald Isle. It's a snapshot in time, and I'd love to share it with you. To my aunt, who loved me with every fibre of her being, and told me each time I came home from London how proud she was of me and my good new job, and to never come home with the darkie. To my friend's dad, who gave me a job within
Joanne,
so I could get a visa quickly for my Kenyan partner, and who said a few months later, "I don't hire niggers," when I handed him the CV of a qualified man searching for work. This educated, brilliant man whom I adore. To my uncle, who said of my little 3-year-old, "Make sure he smiles when we take a picture or we won't see him." Ha ha ha. To my mother's best friend, lost for so many years, a warm embrace in the Isle of Liddle when we meet again, and then said, "Make sure you don't leave him at home with his dad. We often find they come to church and they've left their children at home. We tell them they can't, but they just don't listen." To my friend who took me aside to say, "I don't like the way your son is dancing. It's too sexy, and my son is copying it," when my son was about 8. He dances the way he danced in the village under the sun. That's just the way his body moves. I get it. I too used to watch small girls shake their bums and put a sexual narrative onto it, until I realized that's just the way they move. To my brother, who after a few glasses of wine asked, "Come here, but is it true what they say about black men's dicks?" To myself, who dreamt that my son was being bullied at school for the colour of his skin, who turned up to the house to confront the child's parents, who knocked on the door and said who I was. "Who? Noah's mom?" "Who's Noah?" "You know, Noah with the big afro." "You're Noah's mom?" "Yes." Mounting frustration. "Look, I don't know if you're aware of what your son has been saying to Noah, but let me just stop you there. You and I both know that my son is better than yours, okay? I mean, I get it. You've got a brown kid. You have to act like they're equal, but you and I both know that. Let's just leave it there." Angry rebuttal rising to my lips, rage, and then, yeah, you're right. Sorry to have bothered you. You know, I walk away. In the dream, I walk away and I wake up with my heart pounding. Am I too a racist? Am I? To us Irish humans afraid. To the woman in the post office who just wants someone to understand her and who gets confused with all the new accents and people she doesn't recognize. To the man who barks at a child at an ATM because he's seen one too many cop shows where the black man is the crim, and so automatically he thinks this child is going to rob him. To you who's only known white skin and Catholic repression and potatoes and pasta, who is fascinated and afraid of what you're drawn to like a magnet in repulsion and attraction and confusion, I see you. To you who doesn't know if you can say black or brown and who's afraid of messing up, so you never move forward. You never reach out, though you really want to. And you try sometimes with a shy smile or a hello that's never seen. To you that is afraid of the shaking bums and the loud foreign tongues and the different gods and the familiarity and closeness of another human body that doesn't look like yours, I feel you. To you that is so genuinely scared that our culture and our homes and our women will be taken. To you. To you, I try to see you. I try to see me, to step back into that dream, to remember that you too carry colonization in your bones. You too carry a stolen land and dignity and language and manhood cut in your blood and on your soul. That maybe deep down you really do love and you really do want to protect. I want to make space for you too in this love letter to us. All of us. And ultimately to you. You who came out of my body. You who does a traveller character in the middle of Duns with your huge big hair and won't shut up when I tell you it's racist. Who runs down the pram with your friend being Indians asking if someone wants to eat in a booze fish shop. The head shake is too much. You who asked me, would you say that if I was white? When I ask you to lower your hoodie. Who came home from school saying, Mom, everyone says Trump hates us and is going to kill all brown people. Your little face ashen with shock. And who just today said, Dad told me sometimes we have to dress better to be taken seriously. You who I can't protect from all this mess. We in Ireland are masters of shame. It is inside us, seeped into the brown soil of this fertile green land. It is bestowed upon us in the holy waters of our baptism. It is at the edge of our secret lusty thoughts. It's in our bedrooms and our wardrobes and our Garda stations. As we attempt to slough it off, we use it as a weapon of left and right. You racist, you lefty loon, you N-lover, Irish hater, misogynist. I would never be like you. You are wrong. You are other. To all of you, to all of me, please, can we just start talking again and showing our beautiful, messy, prejudiced Irish hearts so we can have a real conversation for once.
Here with you having these conversations that we're going to have on this fab platform.
Yeah, me too, Orla, and lovely to meet you finally, even if it's not as we were hoping over a cup of tea somewhere in Belfast or Galway. Great to meet you.
I know. So I suppose it'd be nice to share who we are first to kind of set the scene.
Yeah, great. I'm Joanne Webb. I'm many things at the moment. Stay-at-home mother, mother to a beautiful biracial teen, just turned teenager, Noah, his dad is Kenyan, so he's Kenyan Irish. I'm a theatre maker, so I direct, I perform. I've just started writing recently, and I'm also a family constellations facilitator. So I work with groups on inherited trauma, multi-generational trauma, that sort of area. So yeah, what about yourself, Orla?
That sounds amazing. I can't wait to know a little bit more about all of that. My name's Orla Mckeating. I'm 38 and I live in Belfast in the north, and I am single mum to Elliot, who's 8. Elliot is half Congolese Belgian. I don't love saying half, but it's kind of what I've always said. He's Congolese Belgian and Irish British. And I am an entrepreneur, I'm a speaker, I'm training to be a coach, and I work quite a lot in social justice. I love raising awareness on issues typically attached to stigma, single parenting and race issues, I suppose. And then the conversations we're having today, which I think we need to have more of, really.
Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah, and we've got some questions there in the chat coming in. So the first question is, what's the inspiration for your work? So, yeah.
So I was I feel like I'm peak white privilege. So I kind of grew up in this bubble of, never really had wanted for very much. I, was, whenever I fell pregnant with Elliot, and me and his father were together for years. But whenever I moved home and the relationship broke down, I was more concerned about the stigma of single parenting. So kind of the shame and guilt attached to that in our society, in Ireland and all over the world, I think. And interestingly, and I've been musing on this quite a lot in hindsight of, I never really once thought, wow, I'm going to be a white mum with a biracial child. Imagine what that's going to be like. So no preparation, because I was kind of that person who was like, yeah, but you know, I don't see color, shame, cringe, whatever it is. But I think it's really important to admit, you know, I have said that in the past. It was like, no, kind of on your white throne, I don't see color. I have a black boyfriend, and this is me. I have black friends. And now I know how damaging that is and how much we really must see color and celebrate that kind of multi-heritage within our family. So I suppose the first moment where I knew I had to really get to work and unpack and unlearn and relearn and spread, I suppose, not spread the word, but I suppose bring people with me in our society to make change, was whenever my son was 6. So he was in P2, and that was the first time that he was bullied for his skin color. And the school took no accountability whatsoever. So where my whole life I kind of got what I wanted, and, you know, just everything seemed easy, I had gone to this principal and told her this was happening, and she was like, no, that couldn't have happened in our school. Anyway, racism doesn't exist. Our school's diverse. Look around you. And I know, having spoken to people, that this is really, really common. And those statements aren't, you know, they're said a lot, I think, especially here in the North. And it was that moment where everything changed. Like, that moment was like, no one can help me. No one, I'm not going to be able to get out of this. I need to do the work. So reached out to people, reached out to institutions, reached out to politicians, needed to know, well, what does this mean? What are the rules? Who can I turn to? Where are the policies? How can my son, and obviously other people's children as well in that school and others, go to a place where they're supposed to be safe, where there's hate crimes going on in the playground, and it's so common? And so I just literally got to work. And I mean, I did a TED talk in 2019 in the Parliament here, and that was on race issues and single parenting. And it was really through that I suppose that I really started to do serious work. I suppose it was taken seriously for being able to do the work. And for me, it was kind of finding a tribe, finding people like me in situations like me and learning like me, and always finding that safe space, I suppose, to learn and unlearn. And that's why I started Still I Rise Diversity Storytelling, which started as a passion project and kind of grew during lockdown. So yeah, I kind of went off on a tangent, but that's why I do what I do. And that was kind of the inspiration to move me in this direction.
Mm. Wow, God. Yeah, that's really interesting. I suppose my story's quite different in that issues around race have been around for me an awful lot of my life. You know, even primary school. You know, I had one kid in my class who used to call me half caste and stuff. Like, my ancestry, my heritage is completely Irish, but, you know, I was the most, I suppose, diverse looking thing in my school at that time. So I was aware of this word, like, when I was really young, and I can't remember how my parents answered that. But when I was 14, I found a birth cert and found out that my mom had had a child with an Ethiopian man when she was in her 20s in London. So talking to my dad about that, my mom had passed at that stage, and confronting my dad with this piece of information completely brought me into, like, the stark reality of race and what was considered to be completely unacceptable: having sex outside of marriage, having sex with a black man outside of marriage, getting pregnant. You know, my dad, bless him, you know, was very clear in the fact that this was something that my mom did, which was horrendous and horrific. So for me, you know, those issues, I've been aware of them since I was certainly a teenager, and the injustices in the world based on people's skin color. And It's interesting, like even being asked to sort of come, have this chat with you today, and this I suppose this label of a single mother is quite challenging for me. Like partly because I suppose it's only really in the last few years that I've sort of seen myself as a single parent, because I'm very much still in contact with my son's dad. Like even this morning, I was texting him because I have an earache and he's a pharmacist, so he's, as much as he's living in Kenya, and we're parenting across continents, he still is very, very involved. But I'm also really aware that a big reason I didn't allow that kind of label was because I was so unwilling to be that stereotype. I was so unwilling to be the stereotype of a white single mother with a biracial child. So, I kept it out there for so long, to the extent that I was going, yeah, he's really supportive and everything. And he is really supportive, but he's not here and he's not raising, I'm doing the majority of the work. But I was so unwilling to take that on, because I knew how much stigma, as you said, that it carries and still does carry. And recently an aunt of mine was saying, but sure, there's no stigma anymore. She's not living in Ireland. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, have you seen the reports from the mother and baby homes and how they've been received, and how, the whitewashing, whatever you want to call it, that's happened there, it's massive still. My brother is still not openly talked about in our family. So getting back to the question, it's always been around for me. I suppose my work, like I'm making a show at the moment. I'd had support from Druid, the theatre company in Galway, here to make a show about being Noah's mom, about being the mother of a biracial child. And a lot of my work is around looking at that, but looking at it through the sort of lens of multiculturalism, like and intimate relationships, and my constellations work is very much about how and why we repeat patterns. So I'm really interested in that in families. So yeah, but it very much similar to yourself, I suppose, seeing through the lens of your child what kind of an Ireland that they're living in, or what kind of a Britain they're living in because of the color of their skin, is a whole other level of reality. It's a whole other level of terror. And I think everyone worries for their child, but worrying about your child because how the world treats them because of the color of their skin is something else, isn't it?
It is. Terror that's the word. Like, that is the word. And I wonder, it's really interesting you've said there about the stigma then that's worse. We, like so many white mums of biracial children, really feel that shame for having a mixed race child. Why do you think the stigma is greater for that than a single mom with, say, 5 white children?
I think, like, I'm often interested in stuff that was illegal in our recent past. So I think that there's a hangover from that. There's a hangover from the fact that biracial relationships were illegal up to 50 years ago, or whatever it was. I don't know the exact date actually in Ireland. I keep saying Ireland. Sorry, I'm not including the UK in that as well, and I should be. So I think that's partly that. But I think a lot of it is down to sexualization of Black people. Like, I had friends and family members make widely inappropriate comments about, about my ex-husband, and asking me questions that just feed into those same stereotypes. So there's that. A lot of our relationship was in Kenya. We moved back there when Noah was 4 months old. So, my experience there was kind of really seeing the difference in how, we'll say, Black mothers of biracial children and white mothers of biracial children were seen. But it still came down to the same thing. Like, people assumed that I just picked up my husband on the beach and it was sexual. And, people would assume Black women with biracial children were prostitutes. That was... So a lot of it came back to me to that. So there's something about that sexualization that is a big part of it, like that, you know, that your relationship can't be real, you know, so therefore there's something, another layer of it being, yeah, dirty.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. And the microaggressions, that's maybe something we can pick up on after. I wonder, how can we move away from, it feels like I'm interviewing you now, but stuff you're saying, I'm like, with it. How can we move away from that stereotype of, because we both see it, like we all see it all the time. It's like the microaggressions, the inappropriate comments, the stares. I don't know if you've ever had like, look at me and the look at him and the look at him. And if I'm with a brother or a friend or a boyfriend, look at him. And it's like, this is so damaging for my child. You know, this is not astounding. You know, how do we move away, do you think, from the stereotype that, yeah, I mean, it's a massive question.
It's a massive question. I think that's interesting, isn't it? Because there's that thing, there's also that kind of fetishization, I can't say that word, you know, of biracial children or mixed race children. Like that, you know, I think that's another, we've so many things we could talk about today. You know, what feels right in terms of that term. I'm trying to move more towards biracial, just because, like what you said earlier, that idea of half is, you know, is sort of, you know, then is someone not fully a person, you know. I've heard that kind of, and language is so interesting, isn't it? Anyway, like, you know, so many people come up and go, oh, your baby's so cute, and, you know, the whole touching the hair thing and all of that, and it's like, it's so I don't know, it feels to me like sometimes people, it's so unexamined, and people's response is so unexamined, that they think, like, saying, oh my God, your child is so beautiful and brown babies are so beautiful and, oh, aren't you so gorgeous together? It's still fetishizing it. It's still, you know, but inadvertently. Like, for me, the starting point with this has to be us realizing individually that we're prejudiced, that we grew up in, you know, predominantly white cultures, like in the south of Ireland, you know, a mono-religious culture, so that we have ideas, we have stereotypes. You know, I grew up in the 80s, Black people were criminals, or they were poor babies that we had to pray for and send money to, you know. So it doesn't matter how woke I think I am, or how open I think I am, or like you said earlier, you know, I've got all my Black friends and whatever else, I'm still carrying prejudice because I'm a product of my environment, you know. So I think that for me, that has to be the starting point, you know, because like you said, like, I don't know that I ever said, you know, I don't see color, because I think I did. And that felt shameful to me. It felt shameful to me to see difference. So I think I probably hid that a little bit. But I think, you know, I know so many lovely, warm, welcoming people who say that, who go, well, I don't see color, everyone's the same. And it's like, but you do. And you do have, you know, we're animals at the end of the day. You see someone and you straight away go, friend or foe, are you a threat to me? Are you not? So it's also, I don't know, something for me around like being really forensically compassionate with ourselves and going, yeah, I do have a reaction when I see a group of young Black men, because I've been taught to go, that's something to be afraid of. How do I change that in myself? How do I face the reality that that is not true? That's something that I've been sold, something that I've been internalized, you know, something like I'm a product of growing up in a colonized society that has given me this image of Black people. I'm rambling now. Yeah, I'd like to ask you, Orla, like what do you feel we need to do, or how does this change?
I mean, like you said, we need to accept that I suppose because of society and our conditioning and the way we're growing up, like I need to I can't remember, was it Emma, maybe, is this quote, it's not enough to be non-racist, you have to be anti-racist every single day. So it's making change to every single habit that you do, everything you watch on TV, every book you read, conversations you have, and more, and admitting, being self-aware that, you know, the bias is so important, and we all have it, and it's a red flag. I've fallen out with family members. I have fallen out with forever friends that I've grown up with because there's nearly the blinkers, and none of this is intentional at all. It's a product of society where it's like, no, but wait, there isn't racism here. We don't see burning crosses. We see lots of, there's a black teacher in the school, but it's more than that. And it's accepting that that's it. So where I struggle the most, I think, is having those conversations in groups of white people of privilege who genuinely think I'm making a big deal out of nothing. Like, I can see, the glaze going over the eyes, and I'm like, actually, maybe you shouldn't word it like that. Or Elliot has, there was something I'd brought up the other day. Someone had said, oh yeah, but that person, it was to do with police brutality, I think. And it was like, yeah, but he was a criminal. And it was like, you cannot, this is society allowing you to say that. And when you can't even say your own bias, and we've all said the wrong things, and we've all kind of blurted things out where it's like, oh my God, I said that, or I thought that, or I cringed maybe in the street. And it's owning that. And it's difficult. It's really, really difficult. And it's owning that shame and that guilt, I suppose, in some ways. But it's a lifestyle. And that might sound extreme, but it really is a lifestyle, and being uncomfortable and feeling that discomfort and I suppose diversifying, and that word is so overused at the minute, by me included. Like, I love it, but it is so overused. Diversifying your friendship groups, having those conversations, So I think it's everything. It's making the small changes from the level and from what we have. When you know better, you do better with what we have now and building that up. So even if it is starting with watching something like this and sitting with it, because whenever at the start, when I struggled with the white single mum with a biracial child, I didn't know any white mums like me. So it was there was a podcast I listened to, and it was called All Right for a Mum, and it was about single mums. And that was the first time where I kind of owned that and was like, actually, it's okay. There's other people like me, just because there isn't people like me in my friendship group or in my families, it's okay. So is it watching something like this, going and sitting with it, joining a group and kind of testing the water? And as you said, being so compassionate with yourself. We're all learning, we're all unlearning, and the work's never done. So it's kind of just self-love, self-care, self-compassion, and paying that forward and being willing to learn, I guess. It's complex. It's deep. It's really deep.
Yeah, it is really deep. It is really deep. And like, for me, a lot of my, when I think about the family constellations work I do, so often it just comes back to people not feeling like they belong. So, people feeling like they don't belong and they're not loved in their family. Like, if I was to boil it down to one thing or two things, it's that. And I think that comes in hugely when we're talking about mixed race, biracial people or biracial children, because they are between communities. And by default, then we become between communities as their mothers. And I think that's so difficult, because all of us just want to belong, and all of us just want to be loved as who we are. And there's so many different barriers to that, I think, for mixed race people, and very often that comes up. And then that in itself is difficult, because it's like, oh, you're always saying, Black people are excluding because someone's not Black enough, and shadeism comes into it and all of that, and I think that's part of it as well. Just really, I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel overwhelmed by the weight of it and by all the different things that feed in, all the different aspects, and it feels overwhelming sometimes to me to be able to even start to pick it apart. So like, it doesn't surprise me at all when people just want to go, not my thing, don't want to think about it, don't want, because it's not straightforward. And we're always going to mess up as well, like you said, like, you're always going to say the wrong thing. Like, the other factor for me that feels really huge, looking at it in the Irish context, is about how we see ourselves. I think we're so used to seeing ourselves as oppressed, as the victim, that it's very, very hard for us to go, well, maybe also we might oppress as well, or maybe also we might, treat people badly because of the color of their skin. I think it's very hard for us to kind of, and even today, like there was an interaction I had on social media. I just shouldn't do it, but there was an article on a newspaper in Galway about a young black lad who was arrested last year for an altercation with the guards, and he said he was really upset. He was protesting George Floyd's death, and the judge, quite rightly, that the sentencing, or sorry, the court appearance was the last few days, and the judge quite rightly acknowledged what he was going through last year and said his behaviour was unacceptable, and sort of he got a slap on the wrist and a fine. Totally appropriate for anyone of that age. I think he's 18 or 19. But the amount of comments, the amount of openly racist comments on there within 8 or 9 hours was just, I'd like to say shocking, but that's untrue, because I wasn't shocked. I'm not shocked anymore, unfortunately. But the amount of people that responded with things like, oh, well, I lived in London in the 60s and I know what oppression is, and, all this sort of stuff. So, like, to me, that's a huge barrier to us having this conversation in an Irish context, because we're still in that victim role. We're still in that, well, I'm also oppressed. Like, a bit like what I said earlier, someone used to call me half-caste in school. So I thought that I kind of understood what it was like to be biracial. I haven't a notion. But, and I used to say that to people, I also, and now I look back, like you said, I look back and I cringe, because I was trying to create empathy and kind of go, I kind of understand, but I don't, and I think we do that. I think we kind of go, we were oppressed as well. We were also colonized. So, and then we can't actually look at the reality of our prejudice.
Yeah, that's it. And then I wonder, because you were saying there about contributing to those conversations online, which is, you're right. First thing, who's shocked? These comments, I try and ignore them, but every time I see a comment where it's like, oh, I'm so surprised and shocked, that's awful. It's like, oh, that's awful. Move on to something else. But it's like, are you shocked? Are you surprised? Like, we see this every day. Like, we see this, we have access. We can see it in real time. Like, we can see this happening. So how, there's that part of it. And then how can we deny this and deny that it's even, happening, and that racism isn't a thing? And then I'm interested on calling out microaggressions, non-microaggressions, addressing things, whether it's online, whether it's in, parent groups, whether it's in family situations or friend situations. What are your views on that? I mean, often of late, I've just kind of not opened my mouth and then nearly regretted it after, because for our own mental health, it's just like, well, I'm the only one gets upset here. So and then on the other hand, we need to make change. Where is the line? What do you think? I'm really keen to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Oh, it's really hard, isn't it? Because, I feel like if I don't call it out, which very often I don't, I come away afterwards going, I had an opportunity there to make a change. I had an opportunity to say something or highlight something, and I didn't. And Black and brown people in Ireland don't have that luxury. They don't get the luxury. And they're also not in situations where they're experiencing the same type of microaggressions. Like, I don't know if this has happened to you, but, because if my child's not with me, people say much more openly racist comments to me, because they think they are speaking to a white Irish woman. So like last year, one of my last trips to the hairdressers, a comment was made by someone in the hairdressers as I was coming in, as they were doing the temperature check and stuff. They said, oh God, isn't it awful? I saw this big group of coloured lads on bikes yesterday, and they were all like wrestling and hugging, and it's them now that are keeping the spread of COVID going. And it just, I was so looking forward to my hairdressing appointment. Not to sound really superficial, but I was looking forward to that hour and a half of shutting out the world, being there, being pampered. And I was like, oh. So I sat down and I was like, I'm just going to let it go. And I was so uncomfortable and I was so upset. And I was like, no, I have to say something. I have to say something, because that person is going to continue with those sort of, and me saying something is probably not going to change their attitude, but it might make them think. And there's so many things again, but like for me, there's that edge, because if I call it out in such a way that just entrenches their view further, that's not actually going to make any change. If I embarrass them or put them into guilt or put them into shame, which I think happens so quickly for people, particularly people that have no idea that they're holding any prejudice, it can be counterproductive. So what I did was I sat there, and I had the luxury of sitting there as well for 40 minutes, kind of trying to make a plan of what I was going to do. I knew I couldn't walk out of there and not address it. So I actually spoke to the owner and I asked them to address it. And they were brilliant. We both started crying. And I just said, you know, my son, he's been in here. And for me to hear something like that, and it to be so blatant, and they were so apologetic, and so and I felt like, yeah, that was, they know the person that said it to me, and I'm hoping that they were able to handle it in a way that that person could hear it. But like for me, it's all, you know, and they're momentary as well. So it's also that kind of fight or flight response, I think, that you go into. Is really, it can be really hard to call it out. And as I say, you know, I'm really aware that the way you call it out and the way, like I often try and go, okay, well, what's needed here? Like, do I want to change this person's mind, or do I want to cut them down and shut them up? And I think very often people have these views because they're hurt and they're damaged themselves. So it's like, how do you call it out, and how do you get someone to own their stuff? How do you recognize their humanity, but still recognize that it's not okay? It's not okay for them to say that. It's not okay for them to hold that as valid views. And I think at the moment when there's so much acceptance of hurtful, racist, homophobic views in the public domain as news and all of that, it can be really difficult to have a conversation where you actually get to a point of humanity, you know, with someone. Yeah. What about you? What happens for you in those moments, and how do you think we can challenge them?
First of all, well done. Wow, for having that conversation. I feel like there's no right answer. There's, you know, you can pander around it. It's really difficult. Where I'm at the minute is kind of like, but can you imagine someone was saying that about you or your son or daughter or your partner, and it's taken them along to try and see empathy, see this is wrong. But there's such white guilt and defense, and like straight away, as you say, it's fight or flight. It's like, oh, I've been called out on something, or I've been caught out, or I'm not that race, so I just said it, like, you know. And I don't know, I think it's finding the tools to call it out. In even the expression call it out is a bit like, you know, it's having the conversation, I suppose. And I'd love to know the right way to have that conversation with strangers. With I remember someone when Elliot was in P1, which I think it's different, so the first year of primary school, and someone said a really racist comment, and I didn't say anything, and I was like really angry, and then I projected that anger onto my mum when I got home. It's like, who are these people? It was your idea to send them to this school, I went to as well. But and I suppose it's just, the first time you do it and you realize there's something, even if it's a little glance where they've realized something, and they'll go off and think about it. But I think we need to address it. It needs to be addressed, you know, and the more we put ourselves out of those positions of comfort and just ignoring it, the worse it is, you know. And as you say, we have the privilege to speak out. We have the opportunity to speak out. So yeah, it's addressing it. Really.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm, you know, I'm really curious about this space at the moment about you're either racist or you're anti-racist. I have real difficulties with it, Orla, to be honest. And I know this is probably going to be possibly wildly unpopular. I think there's a huge space in between.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I remember that there was a kind of a mass shooting in Oslo a few years ago. And it really stood out for me. I used to have a Norwegian boyfriend, and it really stood out to me because of the shock that people had. They couldn't believe that somebody, I think he particularly targeted immigrants or non-white people. And people were so shocked. And there's something for me about the less that's tolerated in terms of, this kind of like, that's racist, no, and shutting down and sort of being like, it's either this or it's that. You're either racist or you're anti-racist. Where's the space for genuine ignorance? Where's the space for people who just really need to be educated or who really need a compassionate approach? Like, a lot of the time, people just don't actually understand why. Like, one of the conversations that I'm having a lot recently is around that question, where are you from? And I'm in an organization called Rooted in Africa in Ireland. I'm co-leading the women's section of it, and we had a fabulous event on Saturday around what connects us and what stops us connecting. So we were having a lot of these kind of, what's actually the barrier there, or what am I afraid of, or a lot of the time people not reaching out because they're afraid they might say the wrong thing, they might show their ignorance, they might upset someone, all of those kind of things. But one woman said, yeah, a Black woman who'd been here for years, she said, you're in a room with Irish people for 10 minutes, they'll all ask each other where they're from. That is what they do here. So we also need to look at the context of how something's being asked and where it's being asked. So to say to Irish people, don't ask that question, where are you from? It's really confusing. So, like, there's a conversation to be had there. There's a conversation around, when you keep saying to someone, where are you from, who's asked that every day, who's constantly being told you don't belong because of the color of your skin, in overt and subtle ways. Of course, that question is going to land as in, where are you actually from, or you don't belong here. Or as my son Noah says, when someone asks me, where am I from, Mom, they're not asking me where I'm from. They're asking me, why is my skin brown? That's what they're really asking me. And I think, so, to me, there's a conversation that needs to be had around that with Irish people, rather than just, you can't ask that, you shouldn't ask that. It's racist. So I think it's nuanced, and I think it's nuanced in every community or every situation you look at. But I think it's possibly more nuanced in Ireland. I don't know. Yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it? And it's having the conversation. Because if we are always asking, where are you from, and then we notice a non-white person in the corner, and it's like, right, we need to kind of exclude, then that's discriminatory as well. So and then there was something, so what is the line? It's the conversation's amazing. So there's like racist, anti-racist, ignorant. Where is the line of, because you can kind of be like, oh, it's their generation, they didn't, they're in their 70s or 80s, they don't know any better. But they do know better. You must know better. So where is the line or is there a line? What is the difference then between ignorance and not being educated and just being racist? Is there a line? Like, I wonder, and this is kind of amusing. What do you think? Have you got views on that? Does that mean that then when you bring in class, if there's someone that isn't educated at all, but they're capable of being, open-minded and accepting and, tolerant?
I don't know. Like, I think the most dangerous group of people, in a way, when we come to this conversation, is the kind of the white middle to upper class person who believes that they're really open and inclusive of everybody, and can't actually even go there, can't open the door to the fact that mightn't be the case. Like, I often say that, give me an open racist any day of the week. You can kind of, at least somebody knows who they are, and they're like, I don't mean that in a way, but like, it's the hidden stuff, you know. Like for me, it's always the kind of the unconscious, when you know, and a lot of it comes back to case by case and individual stuff, you know. And I do think that there's this huge amounts of, you know, I think we need to be doing massive work around systemic racism, around organizational racism, you know, acknowledging the fact that all of our government bodies are racist, are prejudiced, and it's not just about skin color. You know, the fact that we can't even begin to look at our systemic racism against the traveling community, which has always been there, as well as people from, you know, poor socioeconomic backgrounds, single mothers. You know, there's so many different groups within our society that have always suffered from systemic prejudice that's within our society, you know. So for me, that's where you're racist or you're anti-racist, you know, when you look at the systems, I think. But when it comes back to the individual, and that's, you know, I think it is a case by case basis. And again, going back to that conversation we had on Saturday, that was a big part of it. You know, we were talking about tokenism and, you know, how do we move towards diversity and inclusion? And so much of it was, see me as an individual first. Don't come and say to me, will you be on this panel talk or will you be in my theatre show because I'm Black? You know, get to know me first. Why would you wouldn't go to like a white dude on the street and go, oh, I need a white male for my, you know, can you tick this box for me? So don't do the same to me, you know. And I think it's similar in those conversations, but then, you know, it takes time. And I don't know about you, but I have this sense of there's no time, because so much of this comes back to, I need this world to change right now so I can protect my son in it. Because at this moment, my son is incredible, is, you know, I think the most vulnerable people in our society are Black women. But I think our sons are not far behind that. So there's always this thing for me of like, I need to change this world right now. I need to make everybody, you know, I need to change everyone's views. And you can't. It's a long, slow conversation, unfortunately. And I think that we're really at the beginning of it in Ireland, you know. I think we're really at the beginning of it. And we're only just being able to even open up to the need to have it. And I think for a lot of people, it's still, oh, look at those terrible racists over there. And, oh God, they're talking about those terrible racists over there, and I'm not like them. And, you know, it's the vast majority of us, I include myself in that, who really need to be just unpeeling, opening the door a little bit and going, okay, what's hidden here? Where, you know, when I feel that little knee-jerk reaction to someone, or that little moment where I go, I'm not going to be able to understand that person, or, you know, it's complicated.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And sometimes I feel like if I benefit from a white supremacist society or system or institution, then, like, you know, unless I'm standing up and saying something, then am I racist? Am I choosing to be ignorant? Am I, you know, there's a lot of, it's a conversation. And then I wonder, you know, you touched a little bit earlier about, let's try and say this word, fetishization,
yeah,
of the Black child, and they touched a little bit about it on a webinar that I was at a couple of weeks ago. Scratched the surface, just, you know, on the glamorization of these brown babies, essentially designer babies. The Kardashians were mentioned, and so then that kind of got me thinking after, you know. And it's one of the questions here. Can a parent of a biracial child then be racist? You know, if there's colorism being talked about in the house, if, you know, I love that conversation because I don't understand it and I want to know more, and where has it come from and why, and can a white mother or father be racist, have racist actions? Maybe not overtly, but is that possible? And if so, what can we do? What do we do? How does that affect then biracial children and our next generation, essentially?
Yeah. I think it's a great question, and my answer is 100%. 100%. You know, I'm often kind of amazed by the fact that I sort of feel like I get a free pass. You know, there's no possible way I could be racist because I'm the mother of a biracial child. My experience, in a way, my experience in Kenya certainly was the opposite. Like I knew quite a lot of openly racist white people that were in relationships with Black Kenyans and who had biracial children. Like they would say the most horrifically racist things. Yeah, so 100%. And, you know, I think that, like, you know, I know of families where the one part of the culture, and not necessarily the Black culture, is completely eliminated, you know. And I certainly feel like, you know, you can have a child accidentally, you know, you can it can be a one-night stand, all of that stuff, but more than that, deeper than that, yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes people can step over again, can kind of be so entrenched in their belief of themselves as having done all their work and being open to everyone and not holding any prejudice, that they can absolutely go into relationships believing they hold no prejudice. And yeah, I mean, it's hard, isn't it? Because you kind of, what happens to that child then? You know, what happens to the child? And I'm certainly, in our case, you know, I feel that there is some internalized racism within the Kenyan side of the family. You know, there's certainly a lot of shadeism in Kenya. So like my experience would often have been of people assuming that I was married into a different tribe. And when I'd say, you know, that I was married into the tribe, it would be like, oh my God, but they're so dark, they're so ugly, you know. And so, you know, it's such a, shadeism is such a big thing. Being light skinned, being fat it has so much value in Kenya. So, you know, I remember my mother-in-law saying, you know, she believed that she was ugly until she saw Noah and she could see herself in him, and then she realized that she wasn't ugly. And it absolutely broke my heart. I know that's kind of that's maybe the opposite of what you're talking about, but I think that, yeah, absolutely, I 100% think that parents of biracial children can be racist. And I also think that there can be a lot of prejudice towards the white side of the family from the Black side of the family, you know. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that, Orla? Is that something you've witnessed or experienced? Or
I haven't witnessed it or experienced it in the same scale as you, and wow, oh my goodness, I'm shocked. I'm not meant to be shocked. I'm meant to be not surprised. I'm shocked that there's such overt, you know, racist comments. Am I right? Did I understand that correctly? That a racist comment in the company of a child that is white is, I mean, it's damaging. It's abusive. I mean, I think, yeah, absolutely. A white parent can be racist, but I suppose it's owning it. It's like you said, are they, you know, accepting, yes, I'm racist, I don't like Black people, but I love my son or daughter or, you know, child. And yeah, it's definitely possible. And it scares me a lot because it's just massively damaging. What happens then to, you know, what is the transgenerational pain and trauma and hurt, and where is it coming from? Where is that coming from, that you could be so openly like that to your own flesh and blood, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really complex, and I think, you know, again, racism is not necessarily a really, you know, it doesn't have to be really extreme. You know, there's such a spectrum of it, you know, and you know, that there's family members that I have that still have not learned how to pronounce my son's surname, you know, his Kenyan surname. And, you know, is that microaggression? Is it racism? It's not okay. And it's again, it's excluding. It's saying, you know, that part of you is not something that we're really going to own, and you know, and again, completely unconscious. And I've been calling it out. I've been calling it out more and more recently because I'm learning, because I'm kind of really seeing now, and again, a lot of this, I think, is stuff we actually do need to be taught. It's not automatic. There's always that kind of gut stuff and that kind of, that makes you feel slightly uncomfortable, but you can't get to it. So things like, like around the names, it's like, I would have said in the past, oh, that's really difficult. Well, I made it an attempt at it. Whereas now I would always ask the person in advance, or I would say, would you tell us your name? I don't want to make it, But I thought, it was only because someone said it to me, really it's a big thing to acknowledge someone's name and for it to be said correctly and for it to be, that's their ancestry, that's their identity. So to think it's okay to just mumble through it or say it incorrectly or make a joke of it and go, oh, that's so difficult, I'll just call you O'Brien, And I think as well, Orla, like this is a big part of it. Like we're so used to having the slagging, we're so used to having the, oh, I was just messing. So a lot, particularly when we're talking about microaggressions, it's hard, isn't it? It's really hard to call stuff out sometimes because it's just like, oh, that's what we do, Irish people or whatever, we just slag, we just mess. I was just joking.
Or like nicknames, but that means like we're best mates. Like if we have a nickname for each other, I mean, yeah, you're right. It's about learning, and it comes down to, I think, just having, from young children in schools, having those conversations.
Yeah.
And then we can't plead ignorance or, if you're in the loop. There was another question there, which I really am so keen to hear your thoughts on.
Oh, no.
You know what it is, don't you?
I think so.
Does having a biracial child inform your dating preferences? I mean,
if you had asked me this about 2 years ago, I would have said absolutely not. But I think it's only, again, really, if I'm honest, it's only really the last couple of years since I've really started to kind of do my work around this. I would have felt stuff and thought stuff and, of course, been very reactionary and looked for racism everywhere as well. But it's only really in the last few years that I've really started to come back to myself and own the racist, prejudiced parts of myself and how uncomfortable I am with them, because I think I have to start there. So if you'd asked me a couple of years ago, I would have said no, it doesn't. But recently, I've really started to reflect on some relationships I've had and some of their uncomfortability around Noah's color. And then I met a black man on a dating website a couple of years ago and had to confront my own prejudice around his original nationality. And so that brought up a whole other layer for me. And yeah, honestly, it was a hell of a lot easier dating a black man. Like, it really was. Like his responses to Noah were just normal. They weren't new, layered, which again, in retrospect, and I'm in a relationship now with a beautiful white Irish man, and his response to Noah is just lovely, gorgeous, and really inclusive. And there isn't, but he's not carrying around all this unprocessed stuff, I think, even though he, I don't want to be too specific, but he's going to watch back on this and be like, oh my God, this woman's constantly talking about
Someone on back. We want to know. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, what about you? Like, so yeah, I would have said no. And now again, I think because I'm starting to uncover my own stuff, I'm kind of looking back and kind of going, okay, this has to be addressed in a relationship with whatever partner I choose. I need to kind of openly have a conversation that how the world responds to Noah and how the world responds to me as his mother, and therefore by extension, there's work, there's conversations needed to happen around that. Yeah. I'm dying to hear your response now.
I think for me, I have dated one black man since Elliot was born, and one major relationship with a white guy. And to be fair, he was amazing with Elliot. There was a real understanding of, I suppose he wasn't Irish. So there was that, I suppose, more open-mindedness possibly. I did, I feel like dating a Black man, there's just, as you say, there's stuff you don't need to explain. And for me as well, it was really, really important for Elliot to have a role model nearly, who was amazing and lovely. And the guy I dated is amazing. And he's such a good example for Elliot. It didn't work out, obviously, but at the minute where I am, it doesn't inform my dating preferences at all. But then whenever I started, I suppose, unpacking my prejudice and understanding the work that I need to be doing every day, I was dating a guy who didn't really understand it, and the relationship just couldn't go on because it was nearly verging on, well, you're obsessed with Black men, or that wasn't the case. And like, it really annoys me whenever, nearly, I don't know if this has happened to you, and I've never actually said this in the public domain. I think I've just kind of thought it. When people just think that you want to objectify Black men because you have a biracial child, and it offends me because it offends Black men. Like, it's fetishization, of Black people, like, as well. And it's like, you wanted a Black baby, or I got accused once of doing the work I do because I want a Black man. And I was just like, this is like, why would I put myself through this? Why would I put myself and Elliot through this and my relationships through it just to find a Black boyfriend? Like, it's too much. I suppose it comes down to the human being that you're going out with. Are they willing to accept their own bias, their own awareness? Are they willing to be informed as well? And then treat, if it is the case where they are going to be spending time with your child, are they going to be treating your child inclusively with the respect and love and everything that every child and every human deserves? And that's what it comes down to. But it can be, that's heavy as well, so there's, I suppose, pros and cons, but maybe I have dating bias, which I haven't explored. That's going to be something else I'm going to need to, but yeah, it's something that really interesting to reflect on, because
I
suppose if I heard someone with a biracial child saying, I only date Black men, I'd be like, okay, why? Tell me why. Is this objectifying, or is this for other reasons? So it's a really, really, really interesting conversation that I'd love to hear more of. I would love to know people's opinions on that.
Yeah, me too. And I think, one of the questions in there, like, I'm aware we're kind of going towards the end of time, but one of the questions in there is, what are the conversations that we should be having and we're not? Well, I think we've touched on a lot of that now. And I think that's, I don't know, like, there's so much for me that's like, that feels common in this conversation is around, the individual and then the kind of the collective, so it's like us as individuals with individual lives and family structures and, our different experiences. And then there is how you're seen by the world and what you represent in the world, And I think any kind of minority situation, any sort of, what am I trying to say? Like our family structures are still fairly unusual, I think, within the communities that we live in. So, there's always going to be a little bit of stereotyping and stuff. So, I think until we sort of, God, so much of it come back to me about, like, just let people be how they are. Like, if they're not hurting you, then, but again, that's not how society, or a big part of society is. There's people that believe this is the way things should be, and white women and Black men should not be together, and you shouldn't be a single mother. And, there's so much of this judgment. So, we're getting a little whatever there from Lorraine saying we've just got 5 minutes left. So top three tips for single mothers. Orla.
Find your tribe. So find your people. Find the people that support you, love you, will not judge you, but will be honest with you and challenge you. self-love. Self-care is another overused word. Love yourself. Taking a day off does not mean you're lazy. Get fresh air, connect with people. And then the third one, being a single mother should be worn with a badge of honor. It is, I mean, I used to wear it as a badge of shame. When I was pregnant, I walked around with my head down for years. And now I appreciate it, that it is an honor to raise your child on your own and raise them as an amazing human. So, I mean, I'm not going to say own it, because like you can't just remove guilt or shame or anything that's attached to it. But it's incredible what you do, and realize that and remember that it really, really is. What about you?
Can I steal all your three?
Steal them all. You can steal them.
I'm definitely stealing all those three, and yeah, thank you. I need to be reminded of all of those three, because it's not easy, and particularly when you're also working and trying to build a business and all of the things, and working in the arts, which is already unstable. Yeah, I think all of the three that you said. I think I would also add to that about having your tribe, but also having some good men in your life. Bringing them in, because for me, yeah, it's absolutely getting rid of the stigma and the shame around being a single parent. And at the same time, recognizing, and again, it might be unpopular, recognizing for a child, it's really great and healthy to have other adults around that they can really call their own. So, and particularly men. So we're, as I said earlier, we're in a very lucky situation that my son's dad is very much involved in our lives, and that we still really love and respect each other and still see each other, see us as a family. Now he's remarried, so that makes it all the more complicated. But I really still recognize that my son needs, I can't tick all the boxes for him. And so I really, like that, I'm really compassionate with myself around that. But also I really try to make space for other people, and particularly men, to be in his life. Because he needs that. I can't be everything to him. So that would be my fourth of the third tips.
That's a great tip. I'm taking that with me, because that's what, I forget. Amazing. I could literally sit and talk. I feel like we need to arrange an event where we can all come together and do this in real life at some point, because the conversation it's such a comfort knowing that there's other people who get what goes on in my head sometimes. So thank you.
Oh, the same for me. Yeah, and huge thanks to Lorraine and
absolutely
Irish group for having us. And I think it's great. I just hope we have more and more of these conversations. And
absolutely. Thank you so much. Okay. See you later. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Irish Roots. Irish Roots is a completely volunteer-led festival. If you can donate, please do. For more information and to see what else is happening, jump over to our website. It's www.iamirish.org. From all of us at I Am Irish, Gurav Mila Mahagut.